Nobody voted for regime change in 2024 in the Mideast or for another forever war. Also, nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I think that's totally that's a absolutely acceptable worldview, right? That you have to thread a needle here, and I think President Trump's doing his best to thread that needle. Yep. However, the nuclear bomb already exists here in this country, which is 20 million criminal aliens, many of them terrorists, some of them perhaps splinter cells or black ops teams that were brought in here by our enemies. They're already here. We have a neo-confederacy in these blue cities and blue states that are bucking federal law on immigration and refusing to hand over their criminal aliens. That's a brand new confederacy. That's a new civil war. That's happening right now. We have a Republican Congress that refuses to codify President Trump's agenda and are too weak to even defund NPR. And we have like major problems here at home. Yeah. And so that is the contention of this program. That is the contention of this show and this audience. Is that like I want to focus on that. And that seems to be the largest and most existential threat to us right now. Yes, there's a nuclear bomb. It's already here. Yes, it was created by our enemies, but it's our enemies domestically here in this country. We covered this breaking news from this morning. It has to do with the Kash Patel releases, because Kash Patel is now releasing more information on the FBI. We talked about China and the thousands, millions of illegal IDs and illegal voter ballots. Here from Miranda Devine this morning, FBI emails reveal to the Post that the Biden DOJ had an absolute obsession with piling on Trump charges. And it goes through these absolute rat bastards who are just constantly looking at going after Trump for recording with the J6 prisoner choir. This is the thread of emails. They were trying to charge Trump for recording the Pledge of Allegiance. It sort of like reveals. These are the same people that like put Peter Navarro in leg irons. These are the same people that probably went after you, right? I don't know if you know the specific
same people. Benny, let me jump in because
Gardenia is the individual that they're going after here. And I guess what I'm asking here, General, and let me like put this into a question. Sorry for the long question, but what I'm asking here is like, when do we start putting people in leg irons, right? And like when do you reverse this tactic on the people that are properly the enemy of the United States of America and are openly trying to insurrect democracy right now in our country?
Yeah. So national security and presidential authorities, okay, the president of the United States for national security purposes to protect and preserve. Okay, he's the only one that takes the oath of office like this, where he says, to preserve the Constitution, right? Nobody, not even the VP, preserve the Constitution. Never mind protect and defend. So the president with presidential authorities has the full authority to make decisions about holding people accountable. And he can hold anybody he can get up in the morning and come in and go, okay, I want the following people arrested. He can do that. He can do that if he feels that he needs to go take that measure, because we are in the midst of a internal revolution and people are trying to destroy this country internally. That we're former members of the U.S. government, senior government officials that were former members or former senior government officials. So he has the authority to do that. The president, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General of the United States is not the senior law enforcement officer in this country. They are not. She is not. The president of the United States is the senior law enforcement officer in this country, because he has extraordinary national security powers, right? And so he can make decisions. Trump doesn't want to go there. I feel it. I see it. He doesn't want to go there. So that means that the rest of his national security team, principally those in the Department of Justice and the FBI, they're going to have to go to him and make some serious recommendations, because you're right. And I'm going to tell you, the intelligence community in 2020, during that election, prior to the election, the FBI reported prior to the election, I think it was 30 October, that Iran was basically trying to manipulate and influence the outcome of the upcoming election. I think that was like the 30th of October. So the U.S. intelligence community knew then that our election in 2020 was being influenced and manipulated by foreign actors. They did nothing. They didn't report it to the president. I had spoken to the president a couple of times during that period of time, And, there's all kinds of misreporting about what I was recommending to him. But that's an argument for another day. But our intelligence community knew then and did not come forward and say it. So now you got to go back and look at who was running the intel community then. Because I can tell you, on the 7th of January, the day after the infamous 6th of January, the day after, John Ratcliffe came out. And people can go back and look at it didn't make much, didn't get much press because J6, right? They were trying to make J6 into an insurrection. John Ratcliffe came out on the 7th of January and said the Chinese, interfered in our election. Okay, well, what? And he knew that before the 6th of January. He knew that before the 5th of January. He knew that back. So I'm just putting information out there that was known by the intel community. And John Ratcliffe finally said on the 7th of January, which I was like, when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, what did he wait this long for? Why didn't he say this way back? And then maybe President Trump could have done and made some other decisions, right? The president of the United States, just because he's the president, he doesn't get all the information, especially he doesn't get it when people withhold it from him, okay? So that's number one. That's a big box. That's a big bombshell that I just dropped on your show. And frankly, that's well-known. It's well-known information right there. But now, thank goodness for Cash and Dan and these guys are starting to put some of this stuff out. But it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. Then when they were able to insert Joe Biden into the White House, which is what they did, then they came after Trump. And they were really, the GOP is just as much to blame, Benny, okay? So this is not about, I'm attacking the left. The GOP is just as much to blame. There are people in the grand old party, right, that wanted Trump to go away. They were begging that he didn't show back up on the screen and go, like he did, whatever, a year and a half later and go, hey, I'm going to run for president again. I'm going to give it another bastards. They're not going to take me down, right? And he did. And man, believe me, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth inside the grand old party, inside the establishment of Washington, D.C. And a lot of people, you go back and look at the articles that popped up, the leaks and all that kind of stuff, not from government, but from establishment types, because they didn't want Donald Trump to come back in. Why? Because what did Donald Trump do? What did he do? And I'm not sure he knew it when he decided to run again. What he did, though, he's exposed, and frankly, this is where I'm a big fan of Elon. And I could argue about what Elon has said in the past and his past, but the Department of Government Efficiency so exposed a level of corruption, and it's not just coming from the left, okay? The corruption is all over Washington, D.C., which is where I'm at today, okay? It's where I'm at today. And if I control what you can control and take control of it. To me, I don't care who gets exposed. But Trump, he intuitively knew that he was not going to give up because he's just not a quitter. He's a fighter, as we all have learned. And his family is right there with him. That's a good thing. But Trump has so exposed a even deeper level of corruption. It's more than the deep state and some of the names that we've talked about on your show today. It is so insidious. It's so deep, and it runs across all of Washington, D.C. I was up in Capitol Hill a week ago, and I met a friend over at one of the clubs, right? And I was sick to my stomach sitting in that room because I'm looking around and I'm saying to myself, God, man, these people don't get it. They don't get that we are at the edge of losing everything. And this man that you're showing right now, those executive orders, Benny, those executive orders are only as effective as those who carry them out. And if those executive orders are not being carried out, and if there's nobody checking, there's a thing in the military, like I'm sure in any business, but definitely in the military, what gets checked is what gets done. And so the president of the United States signs off on an executive order, shows everybody in the world, here's the executive order. Now that executive order has to be what's called promulgated all the way down to the ranks, right? To the lowest GS government servants, to privates in the Army or privates in the military, down to the lowest levels, the most junior levels of our government. Who's making sure that that's happening? Because I can tell you, Pete Hegseth is overwhelmed. I'm fans of all these guys, and I'm trying to do my part to help them. Marco Rubio, Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, all this noise about Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is effective. Is she got all the requisite skills and backgrounds? No, but she is somebody who has the ear of the president and has, I still believe, the trust and confidence. I hope that she does, because we cannot give up. Don't listen to the noise. But I have a lot of time for these people because they listen. They listen. And I believe that particular testimony where she talked about Iran not having nuclear weapons, to me, I believe this, and I'll say it here, I believe that was a setup, because she's only a couple of weeks into the job. So she's taken, what the smartest people in our community, in intelligence community, say about, something, and she presents it, right? Until she can get in and figure out what's going on and actually build a team around her that she can trust. That below the level of people at the top, so the cabinet officials, a couple of others who have been put into jobs below that level, most of those people were put in by Obama, and then they were strengthened during the Biden administration, meaning they added more people around them, right? In what's called senior special government employees or highly qualified experts, different types of government employees that are not just GS, government servants, right? Or senior executive servants or senior intelligence service, right? These are different components of the government that not a lot of people understand. I do. And so who is executing those executive orders on a daily basis? Who's going out and checking randomly, showing up to Benny Johnson's studio and going, okay, Benny, are you using this particular thing with the FCC? Who knows? So people don't understand. I want to put it in the perspective of your audience, because somebody's got to check.
So your contention here, and I'm sorry, but I just have to ask a follow up on this, because it's wild that you're saying that Tulsi Gabbard may have been given incorrect information in order to create some sort of frictions there. We've obviously seen this with Signalgate, where there's still no proper explanation as to why one of the most anti-Trump visceral reporters was added to a classified chain. I'm sorry, Benny.
It happened to me. It happened to me when I was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. My testimony, okay, this happened to me, but I had 5 years of combat experience, right? I'd been fighting these bastards for a long time, and I had been studying them like I've been studying the Chinese for 40 years. My testimony, my written testimony came back, and the White House had changed it. They wanted me to say a certain narrative that Obama was talking about at that time. And that was the reason why under the Obama regime, I'll call it a regime, under the Obama regime, I was let go because I was not going to follow the narrative. And I didn't, in very public testimony, where all the others, a very famous picture of Clapper, Comey, Brennan, right, myself, and we were asked the question about Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And because remember, Obama said Al-Qaeda's on the run, bin Laden's dead, right? So that was the narrative that they wanted. I didn't follow that narrative because it wasn't the truth. It wasn't the truth. And so, but I knew, because I had at that point in time, I had about 30 plus years of experience in the intel community, and I knew how intelligence can be weaponized and politicized. I knew it. That's just not my thing. I came off the battlefields where, if you weaponize or politicize intelligence, people are going to die. And so that's what our intel community became, particularly under Jim Clapper. Jim Clapper is one of the worst bureaucrats. Jim Clapper was a bureaucrat in the intel community for, I think, 55 years.
So right? They tried to manipulate your testimony.
Yeah, so that's why I say with Tulsi, I'm not surprised that Tulsi was given, because Tulsi's just in the job. It's like, what are you going to expect her to do? Go and study? I mean, maybe she challenged, but she's like listening to people who are the experts, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it is a very unenviable position to be in. President Trump, the hand of God on him, clearly, because I don't know any other man who could withstand the amount of pressure that he is under right now, and doing it very coolly and very calmly and threading this needle. Again, you have real problems no matter what choice he makes. I mean, there are going to be major results that could be good and bad, and it's a tough position to be in, especially with a bunch of rats around you and a bunch of people leaking or trying to manipulate your administration. Just really quickly here, just very quickly in the end, because JD Vance is somebody who is advising the president, is in his ear and is in these meetings. Seems to be a very steady hand. Would you advise the president? What would you advise the president right now, given the circumstance with Iran? Would you advise him to strike Iran right now?
No, I wouldn't. I would wait to. The one thing that I know about warfare is that I can tell that the Israelis are on a very methodical and determined campaign, military campaign with a series of objectives, a series of phases, and they're likely into well into their second phase of this operation, of this campaign, from a military campaigning perspective. So I would not. It's kind of like in warfare, Benny, the best plan has the most options right up to the last possible minute. So the president has to have all the options available. And if he decides to use them, he needs to know, when I make that decision, how long is that going to take to implement? When I make that decision, how long is that going to take? So he's got to have the timing and the sequencing and all these kinds of things in mind and people around him. So I don't think right now is the time. I do, as I look at what the Israelis are doing, because Israel doesn't want army divisions and boots on the ground. What we all want, I want the Iranian people to rise up. The other aspect of what Trump's got to think about, and this is where JD Vance comes in very handily, it's to continue to pull on the president to make sure that he doesn't lose focus of why he was elected president of the United States. Back to something that you said, a while back there about where there's a nuclear weapon right here in this country right now, right? I mean, and there is. So I think that those steady hands around him, and I would say that Trump's probably one of the most steady because of the kinds of things that he's done. There are times when I felt like, God, I wish Trump would just do this right now, something that he could have done inside the country, right? And that has to do with accountability, but another day. Because right now, the steadiness that he requires are those options that I just, we've talked about, and he needs to know the timing and the sequencing. So right now, I would say hold. I would say, no, just hold on that option. Let's see how the Israeli campaign continues to unfold, and let's see what the world is going to do, because NATO is going to try to pull Trump into the war in Ukraine, and what are we going to have? I mean, that's nuts. That's nuts up there what we're doing. And over $500 billion we spent. The Chinese, with what the Israelis are doing, remember how much oil the Chinese pull through the Straits of Hormuz. And I said it this morning. That's a very devastating thing, as well as the tariffs. So there's some boxing going on here. If you think about a boxer who's in one stance and then changes the stance, right? Trump is able to be that adaptive in his ability because, frankly, the United States of America still has, and that's what I want. That's kind of how I want Trump to think. But I do want Trump to come out to the American people and tell us with some great clarity where parts of his head are, where America needs to be thinking. What are the objectives that he is still seeking, given the mandate that he was given by the American people? You got to keep the troops informed, Benny.
Yeah. Well, we would love that. We had there was some fake news the other night about President Trump making an address to the nation. We were locked and ready at the studio just in case that happened. We feel like that's probably going to be something that occurs and that happens. And I also hope that the president has the Ayatollah welcome to the White House. I really do. Like, I sincerely look forward to that meeting. I can't wait for that. It'll make Zelensky and the South African president meeting look like child's play. Like, could you imagine, like, turn the lights down? I want to show the Ayatollah something. You don't have the cards. You don't have the cards.
You know what? Trump crossed that blue line in South and North Korea too.
That's right. Hell yeah, man. That's my favorite Trump moment. He'll never be able to, no matter what, as president, my favorite Trump moment obviously is fight, but my favorite Trump moment as president is him walking into North Korea. That's the strongest thing any president's ever done in my lifetime. Period. Yep. That's exactly right. Oh, I love it. I can't wait for the Ayatollah meeting in the Oval Office. That'll be It'll be amazing. Thank you, General. God bless, obviously, whatever work you're doing there in Washington, D.C. If you're right there in the heart of the city, we have a feeling something you're cooking with something. So we look forward to seeing what you have to do. Here's the General's book, by the way. Here's the Amazon link. It's called Pardon of Innocence. He spoke about it earlier in the show. If you want to go pick it up, here it is right there on Amazon. And here's the General on X. It's got 2 million Americans follow him. Obviously, you should be one of them. Fight with the people who are fighting for us. And nobody fights harder than General Flynn. Godspeed.
All right, Benny. God bless. Thanks for the time.